So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Livvy Moore. I am one of the co-founders of a creative studio called Milk. And we set up this talk essentially to talk about this. So I think it's safe to say that Covid-19 has completely thrown our industry upside down in more ways, I think, than any of us could ever have anticipated. Certainly since the outbreak, we at Milk have just been inundated with brands essentially asking us, what the fuck do we do? So today we are here to try and answer that question together with you guys. Now, just a disclaimer up front, I'm really sorry if this disappoints anyone. But there is no one set answer. There's no sort of like magic rule of how we navigate this. But equally, if there was, we'd all probably be putting out the same work, which would be quite shit. So nobody wants to see that. There is, however, I'm happy to say, a framework that we have pulled together of really practical steps that all of us can take in order to figure out what's right for us, for our brand, for our business, and also for our audience. Now, the steps that we're going to take you through today are incredibly universal. So if you're listening in on behalf of a brand, you can use this plan to steer your new marketing strategy. If you are an agency listening in, you can use this to come up with campaign ideas to pitch to your clients. Equally, if you're a freelancer or you're a small studio, and perhaps you're struggling to find work at the minute, don't worry, you can still apply these steps. At the end of the day, you within yourself are a brand and your potential clients are your audience. Now, one of our core values at Milk is no bullshit. So just before we kind of get started, I just want to let you know that in no way are we here today to pitch to you our services. We're not going to give you massive abstract ideas that look really shiny in a presentation, but ultimately won't help you. Our aim instead is purely to tool you with practical and tangible advice that hopefully will help you come out of this period stronger than you went into it, and as a result, hopefully share our belief of creating better work and putting better work out into the world. So on that note, I will get started right away. So in order to figure out what your next move is, it's really important that you don't just dive headfirst into just doing stuff. And I know that the pressure is on all of us to get our COVID comms out the door as soon as possible. But rushing is only going to result in bad work, and bad work means you usually have to do it again and you waste lots of your time, energy and money. So whilst it would be really easy to skip to step number 4, we believe that it's really crucial to work through these steps thoroughly in order to make sure that your plan and ultimately your output is successful. So the 4 phases of this plan are really, really simple. We have accept, assess, adjust, and action. And throughout this talk, I will be taking you through these steps one by one. So we'll start at the beginning with accept. So before any of us can do anything at all, we have to accept the impact that coronavirus has had on us and on our business. Now, at the start of the global pandemic, many of us, myself definitely included, were certainly in some form of denial around the gravity of the situation, as well as the kind of predicted duration that this might last for. So this phase isn't about communicating with anyone apart from ourselves and potentially, if you're a larger company, with your own team. And the way I kind of think about this section, I suppose, is a little bit like that time that we've all experienced where you get a dreaded letter in the post of a bill that you need to pay. And I think we've all been there where we've ignored the letter for a while, somehow thinking that by leaving the letter unopened we are buying ourselves more time. But truthfully, we lay in bed and we worry about the letter and that we've left unopened. So essentially this section is all around opening our letters from COVID-19. We have to read them and we have to accept the truth about our situation. And until we do this, it's absolutely impossible to plan for the future. and one of the things that I think is really important is to face something head on, is actually taking a pen and paper and writing down. So at the end of this talk, I will be sharing with you a workbook guide that we have created for all of you that are attending today. So we'll send you a WeTransfer link and you can download this. And within that, it has lots of questions and space for you to write to help you face the situation head on. So once we've kind of, I guess, gone through that emotional trauma and we've worked all that out, the next phase is to assess. And I think the truth is, once we've kind of taken that time to accept our own situation, we then really have to start thinking about our audience. And for brands, obviously your audience is those who buy your product. For agencies, your audience are those who buy your services. But for freelancers, if you're not sure who your audience are, we would define it as the people that commission your work, essentially whoever is going to be spending money to benefit you. So we need to start really thinking about the impact that coronavirus has had on their lives. And we start by looking at the kind of different areas of their lives, or different touch points of their lives that may have been impacted. Now, I will say, before I go through this section, it's very, very difficult to do this with 100% accuracy. We are not suggesting that you spend lots of money doing research, unless that's something that you're able to do. And a lot of this is about, hopefully, existing knowledge that you already have of your audience, and being able to create educated guesses that kind of follow a logical pattern. So looking at their areas of their lives, I'm going to take you through some examples, and again, this is something I'll mention throughout, but these are examples and your audience is very unique. You will need to do this for yourself, but some examples to start us off is, perhaps because of coronavirus, they felt an impact on their finances. Perhaps they felt an impact in the sense of, their ability to travel freely. Perhaps they felt an impact on their usual daily routine. So once we've kind of looked at and categorized the different areas of our audience's lives that may have been impacted, we need to then make educated guesses as to how this might make them feel emotionally. So an example is, have their finances gone down? If so, perhaps we can predict that they are feeling more anxious than they were before. Perhaps they're not going out as much. So maybe we can predict that they feel slightly more bored than they did when their lives were more busy. So they're not going out anymore and commuting for 3 hours a day, and their general routine has been disrupted, which essentially might mean that they have more time, and during this time perhaps they are feeling more reflective. They are thinking more about themselves, about what they want from their lives. So once we've kind of looked at making a logical conclusion as to how their emotions might be feeling, we need to start looking at how these impact points have changed their behavior. So in plain English, what do we predict that they give a shit about at the minute, and what just doesn't matter anymore? So for example, as a result of feeling anxiety around a drop in income, perhaps they are now spending less money on products that they don't need as a result of those things. And likewise with our travel example, they're traveling less, so they're spending more time in the house, they're feeling more bored, which might result in them consuming more entertainment content than maybe they previously did before. Perhaps they weren't a TV person and now they're just discovering how great Netflix is. And for example, a shift in routine may have made them more reflective and really thinking about what they want for their lives, thinking about self-care. So perhaps they're downloading more self-help apps, more meditation content. So this is kind of an example framework for you. Now, the objective of this outcome is quite simple. So we're looking to create a list of informed statements. So some examples for you off the back of those. Number 1, my audience is struggling with money, which has made them feel more anxious than usual, which means they're spending less money on products they don't need. And as you can see, we've literally just taken this from the logical steps that we took before. So doing that again, my audience is traveling less frequently, which has made them feel more bored than usual, which means they're consuming more entertainment content right now. And finally, my audience's daily routine has changed, which has made them feel more reflective than usual, which means they're downloading more self-help apps. Now, these statements are super simple, but they're also really important, and we will use them in the next phase quite heavily. So, the third phase of our plan is adjust. So now that we have our list of audience statements, we basically need to start working out what is a good idea and what is not a good idea to incorporate into our plans. So we're going to go back through those statements and look at what impact that might have on our marketing plans. So, looking at the first example around anxiety, financial impact, spending less money on products that we don't need, the logical conclusion that perhaps if I was a brand that I would draw from this would be paid social adverts to push products are unlikely to succeed and will cost money that I could put towards something else. Now, this is an important one, and it's really important to recognize bad ideas because certainly for larger brands, but also freelancers and agencies, you're not exempt from this either. We like to do what's familiar, and we know that things have worked before COVID, and it can be really hard to get out the routine of just keep executing the same stuff. But during this period, my prediction is that all of yours, just like ours, our resources are running thin. You know, we are more tired than usual. We are working over hours to try and make our businesses work. Our finances have been impacted. So stepping outside of our comfort zone and having the confidence to take our bad ideas right now and move them out is going to be a really crucial part of evaluating what our next steps are. So looking at the second statement, this audience, for example, might lead us to wonder whether our business has a place within the entertainment world. So perhaps, you know, this is a new method of communication that we haven't done. For example, should I start a podcast? Could I create a YouTube show? If you're a large brand, maybe you could sponsor a TV show. Maybe we could advertise on Spotify. Now, of course, the type of route we will take will, you know, depend on our budget and also what ultimately our audience is going to respond to. But this type of statement suggests to us that this might be an area worth exploring. This is something where there's an opportunity for us to do something new that might be relevant to our audience right now. And then the final example, you know, it could lead us to think about executional methods, but it also provides something different, which is helping us pick potentially a new tone. So maybe it's not about changing the thing we do, but changing the way in which we do it. So this statement, my audience's daily routine has changed, which has made them feel more reflective than usual, which means they're downloading more self-help apps. If we read between the lines, potentially this says to us, I should change my usual tone of voice, which is normally quite dry and quite witty, to something maybe slightly gentler, more empathetic and praiseful of their new kind of reflective state of mind. I think it's also important to be able to evaluate sometimes when the final kind of output of this phase doesn't always have to be that we're going to create an entirely new way of doing things, but you know, sometimes it's just a case of changing our tone. Now, I mentioned this at the start, but I'm going to say it again because it's really important, which is that all of these examples that we've just gone through are extremely obvious, but that doesn't mean that they are accurate in any way to your business or your audience. It's really important that throughout this entire presentation and when you are doing this, that your business and your audience are completely unique. And not to take everything too literally. I know that lots of brands, for example, at the moment are live streaming, and you know, it might feel like, oh, I need to do that. But equally, it's important to remember that you need to go through these motions and you need to work out what is right for you. Because that's how you're going to essentially be successful and speak to your audience in a relevant way. So the output of this section should be really simple. We should be able to take all of the statements that we made in the first section and bucket them into 3 lists. So the first list is shit ideas. So ideas that, you know, maybe were great before COVID-19, but right now are not a good use of our resources. The second list is good ideas. So areas of opportunity, perhaps ones that we have explored before, but also maybe areas that we never thought that we would get into. And then the final list should be around areas where we're not necessarily thinking about the execution, but we're thinking about where we might shift our tone of voice. So the final phase that we need to go through, of course, is the toughest one, which is action. So now that we have our kind of lists, the kind of hardest step to do is to work out what we are going to action and how we are going to do it. So the first step that we need to take is we need to take our list of shit ideas and we need to just push them to one side. And I know that, you know, especially for brands, but for all of us, it can be really tempting if something on that list feels really familiar. But if any of your ideas have ended up on your shit idea list, we just need to cross them off. So that means that we should only have 2 lists remaining, which is our edit to our tone, so changing the way in which we speak to consumers, and then suggested areas that we could move in. So for a kind of walkthrough example, our tone list may potentially have things on it like this: compassionate, thankful, entertaining. And our areas of opportunity list, or our good idea list, may have something like this on it: Spotify adverts, social videos, podcasts and YouTube shows. What we need to do now is start matching tones with the appropriate outputs. So, for example, we will create a Spotify advert, 30 seconds long, that effectively communicates that we understand how shit this is for our consumers and will continue to support them as a brand. Number 2, we will create a hero video for Instagram that thanks the frontline workers within our community for the work they're doing and encourage others to share their thanks too. Number 3, we'll create a podcast and we'll also film it and we'll pop that on YouTube. That doesn't actually focus on Covid-19 at all, but instead just entertains our audience and gives them a welcome distraction from everything that's going on around them. Now, you may have multiple outputs that all match one tone. It might be that every single way of executing all is under the empathetic or the thankful bracket, or it might be that different outputs require entirely different tones, and there's no set rules. So, you know, it's your job to kind of mix and match and figure out what feels right for you. And one thing that we have to acknowledge is, of course, that executing some ideas is going to be really hard. For example, making content is a common problem that we're all experiencing, what with social distancing. And for example, running paid adverts can be really expensive if your income is being affected. But what I would urge you to do is, before you kind of just dismiss an idea as too difficult to do, make sure that you've actually sat down and tried to problem solve how potentially you might be able to work this. So, you know, for example, we can't get out and we can't film content. Perhaps maybe think about animation, which maybe isn't a familiar route to you, but would be a way that you could create content without going outside. Can't run an event like myself today, perhaps try a virtual one. Maybe you can't afford to make an advert or something shiny, but maybe you can afford to buy a microphone off Amazon and make a podcast. And you know, potentially maybe you don't know how to edit and you can't afford a video editor. Well, maybe now's the perfect time to learn how to do that, and you've got a friend that can teach you. So this part of this section is really about just not throwing ideas out because they feel too difficult, and really taking the time to talk to friends, talk to colleagues, talk to your partner, and try and creatively problem solve different ways in which you might be able to approach still creating the outputs that you know are going to work with your audience. So once we've done our creative problem solving and we've got all of our sentences of ideas that we can do, we have a chart that we need to fill in, and it has 2 scales. So the first is low to high impact, and this is talking about the predicted impact that it could have with our audience. You know, is it going to be like the best idea ever, we're so excited, we know it's going to take off, or is it kind of like a very gentle touch point? And then we have the high risk and low risk category, and this is predominantly talking about financial risk, but it's also talking more holistically around the kind of time commitment that's needed and the energy that needs to go into something. So what we want to start doing is basically mapping out where our ideas sit within this scale. So for example, our Spotify advert may have really amazing impact, but this is going to be really expensive. So it goes in the top left-hand corner. And perhaps our video sort of social assets, we think, you know, pretty low risk, we can make one of those nice and quick and easy, but we're not sure that this is going to have that sort of wow factor that our audience are looking for. But our podcast idea actually is quite cheap to make, and we think the impact on our audience is going to be really high, so that would sit in our high impact and low risk column. And the idea is that by the end of doing all of these exercises, you should have at least 3 ideas sat in that top right-hand corner. And I promise you, if you don't have 3 ideas sat in that corner, then just go all the way back to the beginning, all the way to our first phase of acceptance, and start again. And keep going through until eventually you have 3 ideas, because those 3 ideas that you come out with at the end of this process will be worth pursuing, and we are really confident that they will be successful. So that's it. It's pretty straightforward. That's the 4-phase plan for navigating COVID-19 that we've put together. And in summary, it has genuinely always been our belief at Milk, since we first started, that budget size really is just no match for unparalleled creativity. And during this very, very bizarre time, we are so confident that those businesses that use their incredible creative ability and embrace flexibility and embrace the idea of change will not just continue to grow, but really, truly thrive throughout these times. Now, as I mentioned throughout this talk, we've created a workbook that you can download, and I will put the WeTransfer link in this chat, and anybody, you're very welcome to email to grab that off me afterwards if needed. So this workbook will recap the 4 phases, but it also really sort of lays out a lot of provocative questions for you to answer, and gives you space to write, to try and essentially work through it and problem solve for yourself. So just a massive thank you from me to everybody who joined. I genuinely really hope that this talk provided some sort of hope for you all, and hopefully has made you feel empowered to go out and take control of your situation. And just another note, you know, I really cannot wait to see all the work that you guys produce over the coming months. And please send me all of your projects by email or tag me on Instagram. And I also need to say a massive thank you to Max Sidentoff. If you haven't heard of him, he is a wonderful artist based in Germany. And he's also a very, very good photographer, and he provided all of the amazing photography that we've used throughout this through this presentation. So just a shout out for this photography collection. It's called How to Survive a Deadly Global Virus. So make sure you go and check it out and give Max some love. Thank you for all coming, I really appreciate it. And I will see all of you soon, I hope, whether that be virtually at our next talk or by email, or maybe when all of this is over, we can finally have a cup of coffee together again. But yeah, enjoy your evening, stay safe everyone, and I will see you all. Bye.